How's it going, everybody? This is Cameron White with White Light Astrology, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope. What the fuck is going on in the universe for November 4th through November 11th of 2019? Thank you guys so much for being here and liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys, and I'm so glad you guys can be here with me this week. This week, we don't really have a whole lot going on. As you can see at the highlights, that there's really nothing going on this week. It's mostly lunar transits this week, and we do have Saturn sextiling Neptune, which those are bigger planets. They're not, it's gonna be there, but it's not like it's super in your face like, you know, how I feel like the rest of this year has been. But this week does slow things down. Besides Saturn sextiling Neptune, we do start next week, or end this week, however you want to look at it, with Mercury having its inferior conjunction with the Sun, going Cazimi, as well as the full moon in Taurus. However, we're going to be talking about that at the end of this video, of course, but I don't really think that that's going to play the biggest role of, like, that's what we're going into next week with this week. Because this week it is just a lot of lunar transits, and this is kind of nice to kind of have like a nice little break. That doesn't mean that nothing crazy is going to happen to you. Who knows what's going to happen? However, with this week being mostly about the lunar transits, this week gives us an opportunity to kind of feel things out, give us like an opportunity in just a second to breathe and kind of reevaluate everything. I feel like since like July and August, things have just been going so fast, and now that things kind of slow down a little bit, it just gives us a time to breathe. It gives us a time to, you know, feel things out for a second, especially since this past week, after this new moon in Scorpio, we had the moon going into Sag and, you know, Mercury retrograding, and then all of a sudden the moon was in Capricorn, where everything had to be kind of serious for a couple days. Now, as we start this week with the moon in Aquarius, and as it moves forward, we kind of get to be a little bit open. So let's go ahead and jump into the horoscope. So starting today on Monday, on November 4th, we're going to be having the moon in Aquarius start to make a trine to Mars while it's in Libra. And Mars in Libra kind of can struggle with, you know, initiating action, being the first one to do something, being decisive about something. Mars in Libra is in detriment there, so Mars can kind of struggle with that indecision in that imbalance. However, while the moon is in Aquarius, the moon all about our emotions, how we're feeling things, while it's in the sign of Aquarius, trying to help us be more constructive with our ideas, help us be a little bit more social with connecting to the things that are going to make us feel a little bit more comfortable. It's kind of like when you have the moon in Aquarius, it's like connecting all of the dots that get you in your own comfortable space that works for you. And as the moon is in Aquarius, kind of trying to figure everything out in a very solid and sturdy manner like Saturn would like it, the moon starts to trine to Mars, where this kind of gives us a little bit of motivation to do something. This puts the work in our terms, where on Monday it's going to be a little bit easier to move forward with things. However, on Monday as well, the moon will be squaring the sun while the sun's in Scorpio. So I said this in last week's horoscope, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was along the lines of, like, you kind of have to be open about ideas, and that might be frustrating because you might have to do something that will work, but it may not be exactly what you want. And that's okay. We don't always get what we want in life, but as long as it works, that should be fine enough. The only other thing, though, on Monday is that we do have Mars squaring Pluto, and I don't think I put that in the little thing right here, but with Mars squaring Pluto, you guys know me, I like Pluto, it's great in like natal charts and stuff, but it's not really like when you have Mars squaring Pluto, yeah, it's Pluto, you can look at it as a malefic planet. Mars is definitely malefic, but Mars is kind of in detriment right now, so it's not really like it's doing anything. It's not like, you know, like when people were talking about like Mars squaring Saturn, it's like, yeah, that sucks, but it's Mars in Libra. Like Mars in Aries squaring Saturn is like, ugh, like that's going to be rough. But while Mars is squaring Pluto, I think this is going to be a good opportunity to really look at how we make our decisions. And I say that because while Mars is in Libra and we can be indecisive, Pluto in Capricorn is kind of like, this isn't something that we can just fuck up on. This is something that we kind of have to take a little bit serious. We can't just, you know, go, oh, I messed up, or oh, I don't really know, I don't really feel like it, I guess I'm not going to do it. Like, Mars squaring Pluto is, you might have to decide now, and you may actually have to do something now. But luckily on Monday, with the moon being in Aquarius, as it's, you know, kind of getting us connected to more things, having a solid structure on our ideas, so that starts to apply to Mars. There is an opportunity there. There is something there that will work. But with the moon squaring the sun, may not be what you want, but who knows? It may be. Stay open to that. Then as we go on to Tuesday on November 5th, that's when we're going to have the moon still in Aquarius start to make a square to Mercury while it's retrograde in Scorpio. So this is more of that, you may not like that answer. As the moon's in Aquarius, like, it has a job to do. Aquarius is kind of like, there are social standards. Like, there are ideas that they might as well be written in law, that they're so real. They might as well be like a physical thing. That's kind of like the idea of Aquarius. And like, while there are these ideas, while there is this social standard for say, or let's say there is this, line of thinking that you can go under, that you can use to help you, whether it's get out of a situation, help yourself in a situation that you need some help in, get to a better ground, whatever it is that you're trying to do in your life. The moon in Aquarius is kind of like, hey, here's some great ideas, connect yourself to it. But while Mercury's retrograde in Scorpio, I think the big thing about this is, for one, I made a tweet about this too, is, let it go. Like, this is Mercury retrograde. Like, Mercury's about rethinking, Mercury's about reviewing, Mercury's about reflecting, or I should say while it's in retrograde. And while this is in Scorpio, we're kind of hardlining our focus on stuff, and it can get really easy to get sucked into that tunnel. And as the moon is in Aquarius, kind of having all these other perspectives to look at, maybe this is going to be an opportunity where you can kind of step back and go, what is this Mercury retrograde in Scorpio really making me lock and focus on? And where can I kind of let that go? Where can I kind of take that laser focus off and see a bigger picture? But then right after the moon squares Mercury, it will enter Pisces, where things get even more open, because you guys got to remember, Pisces is a water sign. I like to call it the more true water sign, only because we are talking about a mutable sign. Mutable signs are about change. And water can be a solid, a liquid, and a gas. And I feel like that's kind of like Pisces' whole MO, is being able to be adaptable, being able to be flexible and change, and, kind of fill itself toward, or I should say form itself in, in relation to its environment. And so while the moon does go through Pisces, this is kind of an opportunity to where, like, hey, do you need to kind of be ice? Do you need to be water? Do you need to be steam? Like, where are you really feeling right now? And as the moon does go through Pisces, you have to remember, Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. So this does give us an opportunity to look at things through a bigger perspective, not necessarily like Aquarius was, where there's more perspectives or there's more dots to connect. Jupiter things expand things. How do we look at this through a philosophical lens? How do we look at this through, some people, like every now and then you look at your life and you're like, oh, what does this mean on like a bigger scale? You know what I mean? That's kind of like what a moon in Pisces is good for, is looking at things through that way that doesn't have any limits attached to it. And as the moon does go through Pisces and it starts to make those transits, this is just a good opportunity to really look at whatever situation you've got going on and say, hey, how can I be more open about this? How can I be more flexible with my environment? Because I think that's going to be the most important thing for especially Tuesday, is just be flexible with things. You can't always have control over everything. And Mars is in Libra. Like, you do have to work with other people. You do have to go against the grain sometimes. And that's important. And I know going against the grain kind of sounds hypocritical to being open about things, but what I mean with that is Mars and Libra, it's kind of like, even though you don't want to work with, certain ideas or certain people, you're going to kind of have to. But then as we get into Wednesday, the moon is going to square Venus, which is going to kind of put a damper on Venus in Sag. Yes, Venus is in Sag now. It's lively, it's fun, it's great, but Venus is about value. Venus is about like, what do you just want to like indulge in and have a lot of? And it's in Sag. We are talking about like philosophical concepts, ideas, far distance travel, daydreaming, getting excited just about thoughts and shit. You know what I mean? And as the moon's in Pisces and it starts squaring Venus, it's kind of like, even though I can have this value and this excitement over these exciting new things and this vision that I can create, the moon in Pisces is like, how are you going to get there? It's not just going to magically happen. I mean, you can hope so. Sometimes that does happen. But as the moon squares Venus, this is going to be a good opportunity to where, like, hey, if you have like a certain vision, like, that Jupiter and Venus in Sagittarius energy right now, if you have a vision, you value it, you want to go towards it, the moon in Pisces is asking, how are you going to adapt to that environment? How are you going to change? How are you going to see this situation and get your mindset right, get your emotions right to fit in that narrative? But also on Wednesday, the moon will be conjoining Neptune, which does put, a fog to the lens. You can't see as far out as you'd want to, but it gives you an opportunity to really create a story on what is on the other side. And that's what is fun about Pisces, and especially in, Sagittarius too. It gives us a space to kind of have ideas, to be creative. And as the moon does start to conjoin Neptune, it's squaring Venus. It's kind of like, how are we going to adapt? the moon conjoining Neptune, like, there's no rule book onto how to adapt to an environment. Like, you can do whatever it is that's going to work best for you. Be creative. Find solutions in a way that works for you. Because what I will say is, like, I've been getting obsessed with, like, watching tiny house videos, and every single person who designed their tiny house is like, you have to be creative when you're working on, a small frame. Like, when you are working with a limited amount of space, you have to be creative with how you design things. And it just kind of like blew my mind the way that some people would design their houses based on just being minimal and being small. And I think that's a great analogy to use for the moon being in Pisces conjoining Neptune, of like, like, if you've got a vision, like, create it, but it's gonna kind of challenge you to be creative. It's gonna challenge you to see things through a different way. And I think that's what the whole MO with the moon in Pisces this week is gonna be. But then as we get into Thursday, on Jupiter's day, on November 7th, we are going to be having the moon actually make a square to Jupiter. Now, this isn't a bad thing at all, but what it does do is it kind of puts a conflict of interest here, because Jupiter and Sag is like, fuck everything else. Like, let's make it big, let's make it grand. There's a space here available. There is another side, like, we can go to the other side of the mountain. There is an end to the trail. But the moon in Pisces is kind of like, what makes us say that this, this end goal, like, is the destination? Like, we have to remember to enjoy the journey at the same time. And we have to be flexible. We have to be adaptable. And I think that's going to be a really important thing, especially while Mercury's in retrograde, but with the moon closing out its transit through Pisces. And also on Thursday, the moon is going to be trining Mercury that is retrograde in Scorpio. So while the moon's in Pisces, this kind of gives us an opportunity to reflect and feel, and change with that, and have an open conversation with Mercury and Scorpio, which can be a little hyper-focused and be a little bit agitated, but it creates that space of like, hey, that's okay that you feel that way, but what if we can actually change the tides of how we feel? Like, earlier on Monday and Tuesday, it was like, this solution would work, but it's frustrating, I don't really want to do it. This is when we start to shift and go, you know what? Yeah, I may not want to do it, but now that it works, I'm kind of liking it. I'm starting to grow with it more. I'm starting to adapt to my environment. But then as we get into Friday on November 8th, we're going to be having the moon enter Aries, where the moon, again, it is emotions. It is a reflector. It doesn't really do anything besides reflect. It just shows you a different perspective of what's being shown. It just, it's like literally the idea of light and the concept of it. Like, the sun is exuberating all of this stuff, and the moon is just reflecting it, and the moon will go through its phases. It will show different parts. It will be black, it will be full, whatever's going on with it. But as the moon does go into Aries, they think this is more reflecting, this is more feeling about what are we initiating, what are we charging for, what are we being blunt about. And I don't want to say defending, but that word does strike something in me right now, simply because it is Scorpio season. But as the moon goes into Aries, like, now that we felt everything out with it in Pisces, like, let's do something with it. Where are we getting charged up to? The moon will be trining Venus and Sag. So Venus and Sag is like, fuck it, dude. We're not going to get to, if you're taking a road trip to Las Vegas, you ain't going to get there until you start the car. Like, we got to go sometime. And that's like the moon entering Aries, trining Venus. Like, if there's something that you've been wanting to do, like, you could start going towards that area. This isn't like one of those days where this is a great day to start a business or a great day to start this or whatever. Just one of those days where this is a good time to take one step forward. But then also on Friday, we do have Saturn sextiling Neptune. And the reason I made this a highlight, even though it really isn't, is only because while Neptune's in Pisces, like, that square to Jupiter we've been receiving has been making the whole Neptune, facade very illusionary and confusing. But Saturn sextiling Neptune, like, you guys gotta remember, a sextile is like a friendship, like, kind of like it's kind of like if you drop your stuff in public and some random guy's like, hey, let me help you out. You're like, thanks, random dude. That's like Saturn sextiling Neptune. Neptune's over here, like, let's say Neptune is someone who's at the club on way too many, stimulants, and is getting lost and is like all, confused and just kind of lost in everything. And Saturn, sober Saturn, is there going, do you need a ride home? Do you need to sober up? Can I give you a cracker or something? And that sounds very Cancer or lunar in like nature, but the idea of Saturn being more of like, let's bring some structure, let's have some order into this chaos, into this blurriness, even though it is just a little bit. That's kind of the idea with Saturn sextiling Neptune. And so on Friday, that's on Friday, this is going to be a good opportunity to kind of go like, hey, like, this isn't you're not going to sober up in 10 seconds. It's going to take some time. But what are the small things, the small constructive things you can do right now that are going to get you, I don't want to say like sober on the other side, but more level-headed, more clear. And then as we get into this weekend on Saturday, we will be having the moon make an opposition to Mars while it's in Aries. And this might be a little bit frustrating because the moon in Aries does want to charge, does want to go forward. But Mars in Libra is kind of like, I'm still a little bit indecisive. The real problem is, though, is that the moon will be squaring Saturn. So it's kind of like, you don't really have a choice. This isn't the time to be indecisive. Like, you know, it's kind of like, you know, you could sit here and be indecisive all day long, but you're not going to get anything done. At the end of the day, you're going to have to make a decision. And you may regret that decision, you may not, but there's really only one way to find out. And then as we get into Sunday, the moon will be moving into Taurus, where it is going to be a full moon. That's exciting, and like I talked about in my Mercury retrograde video, this is when things start to become more illuminated, start to become more seen. We can have more visibility in the nighttime, in the dark, and the things that, you know, come up later that we don't always see. That's like the idea of the full moon. It's going to be conjoining Uranus there, where this is a little bit more exciting. This feels a little bit more stable because it's in Taurus. This feels a little bit more innovative. So as we do get into Sunday, things start to turn more towards that exciting, I don't want to say route, but gets a little bit more exciting. But the moon also will be making a trine to Jupiter right before it moves into Taurus. So the moon's in Aries kind of like seeing this bigger picture and being like, you know, I can do this. If I just direct myself and initiate, I can do this. But the time will be now. And as the moon moves into Taurus, conjoins Uranus, that's where you start to feel comfortable. Like sometimes making change is comfortable. You don't always have to, you know, be uncomfortable making change. That's a choice. But then as we go into Monday next week on November 11th, yes, 11/11, there's actually a lot of astrology going on 11/11. So be prepared for all of the Instagram posts of 11/11 and some type of portal that's opening. But as we get into November, as we get into Monday, that's when we're going to be having Mercury go Cazimi. This is when we get those fresher ideas, we get those clearer insights as to what are we holding on to, what are we repressing that needs to get kind of regurgitated up. That's that Scorpio energy of like that gunk kind of coming up to the surface there. This is where we get to see that laid out in front of us. Now that could have been coming up and on its way, or this could be the first time you've even seen it. But also on Monday, we have Mars sextiling Jupiter, so there's actually this encouragement on Mars's behalf to do something and to make a decision, because Mars is like, Jupiter is Sagittarius, is like, come on Mars, make a decision, you've got this, you're smart, you're capable, you're a worthy and loving human being. And Mars is like, okay, that makes me feel good, I can do stuff now. That's exciting. And then we also have the full moon in Taurus, which full moon and Tauruses are interesting because you have the sun in Scorpio being so hyper-focused, being so fixated, being so, you know, driven is a good way to look at it. And you have the moon in Taurus, relaxed, calm, patient, you know, very sturdy, very stable. And as the moon is full in Taurus, I think this is going to be the time to really look at, you know, this is a full moon, this is where things are illuminated, really look at, where am I finding stability? Where am I finding security? Where am I finding, you know, stable ground? And I think that this is going to be really exciting, especially as we move forward with this Mercury retrograde, because it is going to be a little bit difficult, you know, not necessarily from here on out, but Mercury's retrograde. It's going to be just a little tiny bit difficult to always have our minds in the right space. And as this full moon in Taurus happens, it's kind of like, you know, we can have some stability. I can see things, and I can see things for how they are. That's kind of like the full moon in Taurus. This is how it is. This is how it's going to be. It's a good time to relax, good time to get comfortable, get cozy. It's like Scorpio likes to seclude or be by itself, and the full moon in Taurus is like, I kind of like being by myself. And that's basically this week, guys. Like next week, we literally only, and like that's the other thing too, like next week we have starting next week, we have the full moon in Taurus, Mercury Cazimi, which initiates Monday, which we're going to talk a lot more about on next Monday, because I think that's what's really going to be the next push. But then after that, we just have Venus squaring Neptune. And that's what's going on next week. And I think this Venus squaring Neptune is just going to kind of give us an opportunity to be a little bit more creative on what that vision is, and being more specific and being more clear about what we do value, because that is going to end up becoming not an issue, but something that will be needing to be addressed. And so with that being said, thank you guys so much for being here and liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you. This is a long fucking video, even though it's just lunar transits. I just wanted to make sure I was clear and concise with this one. But thank you guys again so much, and I'll be seeing you guys next week.